evening, everybody. Welcome to the 2025 Human Services Candidate Forum presented by Seattle Human Services Coalition. My name is Amarinthia Torres, and I am proud to be the co-executive director of the Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence, and also co-chair of Seattle Human Services Coalition, along with Jen, who we'll be hearing from later on this evening. We're so glad you're here and sharing space with us tonight. I wanted to share a brief overview of Seattle Human Services Coalition for those who may not be as familiar with us. Over the past 35 years, SHSC has grown into a coalition of over 240 nonprofit organizations, representing a wide spectrum of human services across Seattle. These include organizations focused on housing and homelessness, food access, domestic violence and sexual assault services, early childhood education, community-based healthcare, and equitable aging. We coordinate public policy advocacy, collectively strategize about city policies that affect human services, and have made great strides in reducing the pay penalty experienced by human service workers through our advocacy on wage equity. We believe our region has the resources to meet the needs of every person in our city, and that by advocating for those needs with one collective voice, we have the power to influence funding and policy decisions towards those goals. So, this is a big election year for Seattle, and this candidate forum is one way that we support civic engagement at the local level. Additionally, it is an extension of our work centering the voices of the human service sector and the people who provide care to those most impacted by systemic oppression in our city. There's of course more to share about our work and more to share about our goals for this year's advocacy that we have planned, but there's also limited time and I want to keep this moving. So check us out on our website, support our work with the QR code that's on your program, and we hope you stay connected with us we hope you just stay connected with us, yeah. So now I have the good fortune of doing some housekeeping and then introducing our moderators. So the housekeeping piece is really just to help us all access the space together. So we have light snacks. I'm glad to see everyone's already enjoying those. And don't be shy, there's plenty of food to nourish us tonight, thanks to SHSC member organization Fair Start. So thank you, Fair Start. Restrooms are through the doors to your left, and info on voter registration and resources from all of our wonderful sponsors are at the tables in the back, so be sure to check that out as well. For parents and caregivers joining us tonight, we have childcare providers from our partners at Wright-Soika Early Learning. We're really grateful, we're really grateful to have their help ensuring folks of all ages are welcomed and can participate in tonight's event. Check out the side room, past the restrooms, and feel free to sit in the back rows that we have designated there in the back, so you have close access to your kiddos if you need it. A reminder that this time together is meant to be an opportunity for us to listen to the candidates, not an opportunity to heckle or harass them. We understand that politics can evoke strong feelings, but if we see disrespectful behavior, we will be addressing it. We also have ASL interpreters here with us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. So for folks on the mic, So for folks who are on the mic, myself included, try to be mindful of how fast you're talking and remember to breathe. So we're just gonna all take a little breath. Okay, we are almost moving through. Okay, as you came in tonight, you should have received a raffle ticket for a $50 gift card to Tacos Chuki's right over there. Make sure to hold on to your ticket. We will be choosing a winner at the end of the evening, and you must be present to win. So you have to stick around if you want some tacos. And who doesn't want some tacos? $50, that goes a really long way actually for tacos. Okay. And finally, we will be recording and taking pictures throughout the night. If you would like to opt out of having your picture taken, please sit in the designated seats in the back. We should have signs designating folks that would rather not have their picture taken. and we ask that press in the room honor this as well. Okay, moving right along, I am thrilled to introduce our moderator for the evening. Marcia Wright-Soika is the Executive Director of Family Works, a Seattle nonprofit that partners with families to alleviate food insecurity and ensure they have the resources and support to overcome systemic barriers to equity, build stable lives, and thrive. She has served in development, communications, grant making, and program management roles for nearly 20 years, starting her career as a journalist and then transitioning to the nonprofit sector. Marcia previously served as the Director of Philanthropy and Strategic Partnerships for Mercy Housing's Pacific Northwest region and led community partnership efforts to expand affordable housing opportunities in Washington State. Marcia's board service and volunteerism have been centered on social and racial justice, creating diversity, and women's leadership. She currently serves as co-chair of the Seattle Food Committee, is on the board of the Washington Association for Children and Families, and we are very lucky to have her as the co-chair of Seattle Human Services Coalition's City Budget Task Force. Marcia is doing so much for our communities, y'all. She brings a lot of heart, deep integrity, and a much-needed groundedness to our collective work. And we are so grateful to have her here with us tonight. So thank you all again for being here, and let's give it up for Marcia.
Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here today. As you heard Amarinthia say, this is such an incredibly important election for our city, and the rich and really thoughtful questions that have been prepared for today's forum by human services advocates and workers all over the city are really going to help us get to the critical priorities for serving our community and hearing from our candidates today. So it is my job to establish some of our rules for the road. And we are going to be hearing tonight from candidates for Seattle City Attorney, for Seattle City Council District 2, Seattle City Council positions 8 and 9, as well as Seattle City Mayor. We are going to start with each candidate that's here for each race, giving them a few questions that have been prepared ahead of time by human services providers and advocates. And then we are going to give them about 90 seconds or so to answer. We are going to then shift to a couple of audience questions as well. And then we'll move on to our next race. We're going to start off with our candidates for City Attorney. Next up will be the Seattle City Council candidates, starting with position 8, then 9 and 2. And then afterward, we're going to do a really fun lightning round. So all candidates, please make sure you stick around for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have really fun signs for you all for the lightning round. And then after the lightning round, we're going to immediately pivot to our mayoral race. So we have, like I mentioned, some thoughtful and rich questions for tonight that have been prepared by human services workers and supporters all over our city. Audience members were presented with index cards upon arrival, and many of you also had the opportunity to submit questions when you RSVP'd for this event. So if you would like your question read, please write your question down on the index card that you got at the front and hand it to one of our volunteers. Can I get our volunteers to raise their hands? See them all around the room. Please make sure you get your questions to one of the folks with their hands raised. And we should have time for a couple of audience questions per race. So please have your questions turned in as soon as possible. To our audience, your questions should pertain to human services. That's what we're here to discuss. So questions about housing, food security, community health, youth and senior services, domestic violence, sexual assault services, or racial equity, to name a few, just to get you started. And our purpose tonight is to really hear from the candidates. So ask questions that can be answered. Please do not submit statements. While candidates are answering, we will not be taking additional questions nor comments. So please allow your community members to all have the opportunity to hear from each of the candidates. During the candidates' comments, please try to remain silent. We also, obviously welcome you to take care of yourself, enjoy the food and the snacks, visit our sponsor tables, or excuse yourself to the restroom, but otherwise, please try to remain silent. To all of our candidates who are here, thank you so much for joining us. We will have candidates for each position join me here center stage. I'll ask you a series of questions, the first 3 of which you'll have 90 seconds to answer, the 4th and 5th from an audience member, and you'll have about a minute to answer those. Our timekeeper, Jamila, raise your hand, Jamila. We'll signal to you when you have 60 seconds left, 30 seconds left, and when your time is up, please end your answer. We invite you to keep your answers brief and concise because we really want to hear from you all this evening. And a really important rule for the road this evening is that we are not hosting a debate. This is a forum. This is an opportunity for you to speak directly to the voters. So please do not comment on the other candidate's stance or comment. This is an opportunity for your thoughts and your strategies to speak directly to the voters. If we do start to experience more combative type behavior, I will provide a couple of warnings, and if it continues, we will have to cut our time together short. And please stay for the lightning round. It's a lot of fun. It's planned for around 7:20, and it's a fun way to share with us. For candidates in the audience, if you have any needs or questions during the forum, please see one of those volunteers. Can we get the volunteers to raise the hands again? Let's get started. Let's enjoy our evening together. Oh, great, yeah. I would love to invite our candidates for city attorney up to the front. So pleased to have you with us, Erika Evans. And I'd love to invite you to share a little introduction about yourself for about 1 minute.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Erika Evans, and I'm running to serve you as your next Seattle City Attorney. Something that I like to share from my background, I'm really honored to be in a position to run for City Attorney, but I stand on the legacy of generations before me, folks like my grandfather, who was an organizer and protester in the 1968 Olympic Games that raised his fist to protest injustices, human rights, civil rights in our country. And it's that same courage that is in my DNA that made me decide to run for this office. Because I know we can do so much better to provide help and not harm to our communities, and to fight back with urgency from what we're seeing from the federal administration. And I'm just thankful to be here. Thank you all for being engaged.
Thank you so much, Ms. Evans. So I have a few questions for you. We're going to give you about a minute and a half to answer, and then we're going to hear from a couple of our audience members. So as city attorney, what will you do to protect people from these kinds of cruel and counterproductive laws and instead support solutions that connect people with housing, shelter, and help they need?
Thank you for the question. A big thing that I see immediately that needs to be in place is a new reimagined community court. That is something, unfortunately, the current Republican city attorney just ended unilaterally. And it was a treatment court that allowed folks to get connected with services for housing, services for treatment, services to get medical care. That is something we're going to bring back because it's needed when we're dealing with folks that are charged with misdemeanors, which are not felonies. Misdemeanors are low-level crimes, and we need to be providing not harm, but help to folks that are dealing with situations. And that is one thing that I see that is in need of coming back immediately. Thank you.
Where do you see the intersections between human services and public safety? How will your office prioritize community-led safety solutions and outreach?
There was just a report that came out last week from the Seattle Times and also from the Department of Public Defense. And they had a study of 215 individuals that were charged with drug possession or drug use. And unfortunately, out of those 215 folks, 97% of them were charged criminally and did not receive treatment. And that is really contrary to the legislative intent with what happened with the Blake fix that makes now someone using in public a crime. You must be in a position that you are providing services to folks to help the underlying root cause. So that is something that we're seeing currently as a problem, and that needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed through getting folks connected with services like LEAD, law enforcement assisted diversion, helping folks have connections with social workers, and making sure we're being good stewards to protecting folks.
And you mentioned some of these services that you feel may address root causes. What are some ways that you think that your office would work hand in hand with some of those resource providers?
For folks dealing with addiction, that providing treatment is at the forefront of step number one. Getting folks the treatment and services they need is something we must be doing. It doesn't work to say folks that are dealing with addiction should just be prosecuted and put in jail. Jail is not a treatment facility. We know that, and we know that actually helping folks and looking at the root causes and providing the right response that people need is what works. You know, in this campaign, I've gone around our state and looked at different community court models that have community court based in housing community, like at a library, and they have all the service providers in one place. So if someone needs to go into inpatient treatment, they have those treatment providers there. If they need to get medical, they have Apple Health representatives. If they need to get an ORCA card, having the right response is the way to go to make sure we're giving the people what they need. And having it all in one place is also something that helps that person be rehabilitated, and it actually prevents folks from reoffending or being back out in the predicament they were in before.
Thank you. So the federal government's recent actions have created fear and instability for many Seattle residents, particularly immigrants, refugees, LGBTQ+ folks, and those who rely on critical housing, food, and care services. What concrete steps will you take to protect and support our most vulnerable communities from harmful federal policies?
The first thing is fighting back with urgency when those federal cuts are happening and not waiting. I think that's first and foremost. We're really honored to be solely endorsed by our Washington State Attorney General, Nick Brown, who's been leading the cause and protecting us in Washington, and that matters here in Seattle too. So being a good partner to fight back quickly is very important. You know, another thing that I think I thought a lot about in this campaign and speaking with voters, with some of the things you've mentioned, you know, housing instability. Growing up, for me, we moved 8 times before I was 12. There was a point in our lives that we were on Section 8 housing, and understanding what that looks like, it's important to have leaders that have some of that lived experiences in these roles to have the best approach, and also knowing where the best place to go is to find the solution as well. So I think those are things that immediately come to mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move to a couple of audience questions, if that's okay with you.
Yes. Everyone's so quiet. Y'all make me nervous.
I think everybody's following the rules of the road, which I appreciate. So, what are your plans to keep our community safe from ICE and the National Guard?
Yes, thank you for this question. A few things. My husband, who's here, wave husband. My husband's a former federal public defender, and we both served on the Lauren Miller Bar Association. And during the first Trump administration, we did a letter writing campaign and worked to get House Bill 2567 passed, which prevents court personnel for local courts from calling ICE to let folks know that someone that's coming to court has an ICE detainer. Unfortunately, this doesn't apply to federal courts or areas of federal jurisdiction. So as the next city attorney, what we're going to be doing is immediately filing a temporary restraining order if the National Guard comes in. And what that does is that's essentially a lawsuit in federal court that tells, we're asking a federal judge to essentially say what Trump is doing is unlawful and violates the 10th Amendment. And that's something we'd be doing immediately.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and what you're saying is, what we're talking about is people are scared right now. When folks get snatched from ICE, it tears families apart. And it's unacceptable what's happening. And so as a sanctuary city, we're not going to be cooperating with ICE at all. We are under no obligation. We need to make sure that we are keeping Washington working and following that law that's in place as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience member who gave us that question. Our final one that we have here is, why does Seattle still adhere to a 2017 legislation that allows cops to investigate cops when the state banned this practice in 2021 in creating the Office of Independent Investigations to investigate police abuse? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I didn't share with you all, but before running for this, one of my jobs at the U.S. Attorney's Office was a civil rights prosecutor. I was one of 2 civil rights prosecutors, and some of our work involved investigating law enforcement that are committing misconduct, and having that separation from the local departments. That is something that's really important at the federal level. However, when I left the DOJ, what was happening in civil rights and what the Trump administration considered a civil right was no longer, what we're talking about and who it applies to. And so it's really unfortunate and scary right now that that department I left from, that unit I was in, there is not going to be currently, investigations on law enforcement committing misconduct. It does need to be something that's separated. I know that, when we look at the Attorney General's office and some of the work they've done, I'm thinking about the Manny Ellis trial that was taken forward and how that was a separation and a way to hold law enforcement accountable and not something being investigated within the police department itself, but having that separation with the Attorney General's office to pursue charges against those officers.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us. I'm really honored to have you here, and we invite you to stick around for the lightning round that we'll have a little later this evening.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
So our next set of candidates, I believe, are coming from Seattle Position 8. Are they here?
Everyone is quiet.
Yes, it is. Everybody is really following the rules of the road here. Okay. Do you mind taking these? These from you. Thank you so much. Right, so running for Seattle Position 8, we have Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rinck. When you're ready, we will give you a minute to introduce yourself.
Shucks. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rinck. I'm a renter and someone who takes the bus to work every day. And I went from, yeah, let's hear the bus. I love these signs. Sorry, y'all, it's been a long day. I take the bus to work every day where I have the honor to serve the office of Position 8, or as we call it, the People's Office. And in my short time on council, just 10 months now, if you can believe it, this is coming off the tails of a record-breaking one. Oh man, the bus kind of cut into my time. We've been doing incredible work on council that I'm really proud of. I introduced and passed affordable housing legislation to have more community-led affordable housing development, sponsored the Seattle Shield Initiative, and have secured funding to support our immigrant families. And I'm seeking 4 years to continue this incredible work and fight for the people's office. Thank you.
Everything still hear me okay? Yep. Great. So as the moderator, I am really going to do everything I can to remain impartial, but it is also important that you know that when Councilmember Rinck was a student, she did her internship, part of her internship at Family Works. So we go way back. Hence the hug. Right. So our first question for you this evening is, unlike other government-funded services like building a bridge, the city does not pay the full cost of providing human services. Because of this, human services and frontline workers have been underfunded by city contracts for decades. With better funding, community-based organizations could serve more people better and hold on to experienced staff. How will you secure the additional revenue necessary to close the 30% wage gap that human services workers face and ensure that we can sustain and expand essential services that Seattleites rely on? And if you need me to repeat any of that, please let me know.
Well, I appreciate the question because before coming into office, as Marcia just alluded to, I've spent most of my career working in human services and fighting for the investments in human services to support it. And in that work, working countywide, I've had the incredible honor of working alongside many of our hardworking human services frontline staff and seeing the realities and system failures at play and the challenging conditions our human services frontline staff are enduring every day. And I think it's important to highlight what happens when we don't close that 30% gap. It means we have human services workers that live in Tacoma and Everett that commute into Seattle every day to care for our unhoused neighbors because they themselves cannot afford to live in this city. And the cruel irony of that reality is one that we need to be serious about solving, which is why while I was at KCRHA, I was proud to champion and fight for the inclusion of pay equity for frontline staff in the 5-year plan, while I'll always commit to supporting a right for human services workers to unionize, and why the Seattle Shield Initiative was one of the first things that we did in my first couple months on office, so we could stabilize funding for human services that has now allowed for us to be able to seek increasing human services provider pay wages. But I want to be clear that the Seattle Shield Initiative is the first step. We need progressive revenue solutions to be able to fully fund our human services providers, not just to deliver services, but also take care of the important, hardworking staff that carry out this work, taking care of our vulnerable neighbors every day.
Thank you. And I think that folks were starting to get a little concerned because it was so quiet in here. We're going to still try to remember the rules of the road and make sure that we can hear from everyone. All right. So older adults in Seattle face numerous challenges, from lack of access to health care and transportation to social isolation. Alarmingly, older adults are the fastest growing unhoused population in Seattle. How are you centering senior services in our community, and what will you do to protect access to these services in light of the upcoming Medicaid cuts?
This feels particularly personal for me. I was raised by my grandparents and I was caretaken by my great-grandparents. And now I've been through the trials and tribulations firsthand on our systems for skilled nursing facilities, adult family homes, and memory care. These are complicated systems that are under-resourced. We certainly don't have the network of support that we need locally. And then seeing firsthand professionally throughout the majority of the pandemic when I was working in homelessness services, seeing firsthand so many first-time homeless seniors seniors that became unhoused because they were living with their grandkids who were frontline workers who passed in the pandemic. So seeing those disproportionate impacts, but doing work to put together a specific strategy dedicated for addressing the needs of unhoused seniors. But as we're moving forward and looking at a world where there are drastic Medicaid cuts, I'm committed to fighting on the state level. I think we need statewide solutions to be building towards addressing the tremendous need in our adult family home and skilled nursing facility models, building the housing we need, providing the housing subsidies we need, but also seeking a state level solution for providing the health care for all of our community members, particularly our older adults and seniors.
Thank you. Our final sort of pre-prepared question from our human services advocates and workers is that domestic violence is the #1 reason women and children become homeless in Seattle. What are policies or efforts you support to ensure survivors have safe and stable housing in our city?
No, I read this fact recently, and it still shocks me every time it kind of settles in that 1 in 3 King County residents will experience some form of gender-based violence in their lifetime, which is really, really shocking. But I suppose we need to be really focused on how we make sure we are addressing any policy interventions and investment to address this reality. And so I'm really focused on making sure that we are resourcing our gender-based violence service providers while also working on the legal, civil legal system level to make sure that we are also working on policy changes to meet the needs of survivors. So ensuring that we have interventions and support geared for survivors like the Justice for Families Project, domestic violence protection orders in the family law work group, but understanding that not every survivor will find justice in a criminal legal system. And one of the best ways we can be able to empower and support survivors is making sure that they have the resources they need so they are not suffering from any form of financial or economic abuse towards anyone who may be causing them harm. And that's why it is absolutely essential that we are investing in more affordable housing, flexible cash assistance, and making sure folks have their basic needs met and supporting folks while they're actively fleeing. That's why I'll be fighting for those investments in this budget season, and I'll be proud to be working on that. It's certainly the hill I'm going to be dying on this budget season.
We do have a couple of audience member questions, if I can stick around for those. So young people in Seattle face significant barriers when it comes to both mental and physical health care accessibility. What are ways we can support youth and young adults navigating the healthcare system?
Such a great question, because there's so much that goes into mental health care from the standpoint of having our basic needs met can help in mental health care. But I think one of the most recent wins from this week that we should all celebrate is that we are moving forward with a crisis care center here in Seattle on Capitol Hill. This is going to be huge for our community when we're talking about a front door for behavioral health services, and I was proud to work alongside Representative Sean Scott in holding a town hall in the Capitol Hill neighborhood after we were hearing these kinds of community concerns to do some myth busting and talk about what the realities of having a crisis care center in our neighborhood could mean. And so I've been proud of that work that I've done to make sure that we are dispelling any narratives out there that might create uncertainty or fear, but I think our office is really committed to making sure that that crisis care center is successful, and we are really excited to see a unanimous vote coming out of King County Council this week to move forward on that site. But a lot more needs to be done. We know with crisis care centers, one of them will actually be dedicated for youth in the upcoming plan, and I look forward to working with the county on seeing through to see where ultimately that youth-specific crisis care center will be. But I do think this step forward, affirmatively saying yes to more crisis care centers, will also do well for us as a community to be any type of, just work on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, if you do have a question for one of our candidates tonight, please fill out the index card that you got at the front so that way we can make sure that we get them in. Our final audience question Seattle leased the Civic Hotel as shelter space, but when the city instructed the operator to leave the rooms empty, per a report October 6th in ProPublica by a KUOW reporter, Ashley Haruko. What the hell? Those are the exact words.
Whoever wrote that, I had the exact same reaction. Having worked in homelessness services, having seen the co-lead program in real time and the incredible results that it has performed, how it has performed, and what it has meant for people's lives, I share in that outrage. We know in human services work that there's a lot of scrutiny on the nature of this work. There's always a demand to see outcomes and results and all this, and sometimes we know that it's hard to demonstrate human impact with the perfect data. But if there's one program in this region that has the data, it's co-lead. But beyond that, we know there's such a scrutiny on the human services. It is more than disheartening. It is deeply frustrating that we are letting resources sit on the table when we know the need is so high. So I had a very similar reaction. What the hell? And our team is having discussions with the executive on how we remedy this immediately. We can't afford to let resources just sit there, hotel rooms sit vacant while we have so many folks outside who are able to take advantage of those resources. So I share in that outrage, and we need to do better. And I think it's important to note that as a legislative body, we are an accountability mechanism for the executive. And so making sure we really step up to that, to make sure we are providing that accountability in the executive, that's something we'll be doing.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rinck. And please stick around for the lightning round. I'd like to invite the candidates for City Council Position 9. So good to welcome you here, Ms. Foster. I'm really glad that you're here to share with all of our folks here. I'd love to invite you to give an introductory statement.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here and spending your Thursday, spending your Thursday evening this way. My name's Dionne Foster, and I'm really excited to be running for Seattle City Council Position 9. And I'm really excited to be here at El Centro because this is where we had my campaign kickoff, and this is where my now 12-year-old went for preschool and got an amazing early start. So it's nice I feel like I'm at home right now. I'm running as a first-time candidate, so I'm excited to introduce myself and just share a little, that's fast, okay. So I am a social worker, I've worked in City Hall as a policy advisor, I've been a nonprofit executive director, and I decided to run for City Council because I want to fight for a city that's going to be affordable, I want to fight for a city that my son can afford to stay in when he grows up, and I want to fight for a city that works for working people. That means making sure we have effective transit, that means making sure that we have strong social services that we're going to talk about tonight, and I'm really honored and excited to be here and proud to have the endorsement of Councilmember Rinck, who just left the stage. Looking forward to talking more.
Thank you so much. So I think you've been in the room for a little while, so you've seen how this is working. We have a few questions that were pre-prepared by human services workers and advocates, and then we will take a couple of questions from the audience. So our first question is, the 2024 point-in-time count estimated that there are over 1,000 families and over 1,900 children experiencing homelessness in King County. What will you do to make housing more accessible and affordable for families, youth, and young adults facing homelessness or housing instability in Seattle? And how will you incorporate the needs of young families, including childcare? You have 90 seconds.
So this is really important to me. I'll say a few things that I think are going to be part of the solution. So one is making sure that when we're looking at Office of Housing resources, that we are counting and we're trying to incentivize family-sized units around the city. There's simply not enough apartments that are large enough for our families. My son spends half his time with me at my house and half his time with his dad, where they have a one-bedroom apartment for 3 people, and it's subsidized artist housing. So we need to make sure that we we are incentivizing more family-sized housing, particularly when it comes to folks who are homeless or who are living unsheltered. We don't have enough capacity in our system. I was just at Mary's Place recently where folks there shared with me that they get about 50 to 80 calls a day and are able to place maybe 1 or 2 families per week. And so to me, that is just incredibly clear that what we need to do is make sure we are investing in additional non-congregate shelter spaces. And those are going to be spaces that really work for families. That might mean tiny homes, that might mean, as Alexis was just talking about, making sure that we continue to invest in the hotel strategy, but we need to make sure that we are invested in more places for folks to go. I know part of this is about childcare, and this is the place where my kid got great care. And we have the Working Families Connections and other investments that the city has that help to subsidize affordable childcare for folks. So making sure that we are fighting to keep those investments going, particularly because we are going to see cuts coming from the feds and from the state, and so it's really important at the local level that we are keeping those investments whole.
Thank you. Community health centers provide free or reduced cost health services for 18% of Seattle residents and are required to serve everyone regardless of ability to pay. As people get cut off from Medicaid, SNAP, and other essential supports, due to federal budget cuts, we expect to see more people getting sick and needing free or low-cost health care. What will you do to ensure that our community can meet increasing demand for primary, behavioral, and dental health care services?
Thanks for this question. So I was on Apple Health 12 years ago when I had my son and went to Neighbor Care in Columbia City for healthcare services. So I know exactly how important those services are to people. I think one of the things that feels really important is that we're investing in folks who are doing case management. I know that when we're thinking about people getting kicked off of services, Medicaid and Medicare, one of the strategies that we can have is to make sure that we have those navigators funded so that they can help people. I've had that experience where people let you know how the rules change and what you need to do to try to get onto a new program. I think that's going to be really important. I also want to be able to work with King County. Last year we had investments from King County that go into Harborview to try to close some of the gap that's there for one-time funding, and making sure that we can actually look at other strategies to invest in those neighborhood level health centers is going to be another part of that. So I'm not sure whether that will be city resources or county resources, but I think that the city is going to be sort of our first and our last line of defense when these cuts are coming down. So for me, it's about making sure that we are getting people moved over onto programs that they might not already be on through those social service navigators, and then it's going to be about resources that we can provide to those centers to help keep them whole, because we know that not only are people going to lose their care, but those centers are going to lose access to resources because of the fact that they're also going to be hit by those same cuts.
Thank you. Our next question is about meal programs. Nonprofit meal programs provide nutrient-dense, culturally appropriate food to thousands. Meal programs address specific barriers to food access, working in tandem with food banks and meal delivery programs to address the diverse needs of communities across the city. In 2024, Seattle meal providers reported a 24% increase in demand. With record high rates of food insecurity, what steps can the city of Seattle take to ensure meal programs are not forced to close their doors?
And I think I see some of the folks from the different helplines in the room tonight. So for me, one of the things that I see on the horizon for us is an opportunity to make sure we're investing in delivery. So one of the things that I've heard as I've gone out and talked to some of the folks from the various helplines is that they're experiencing an increase, not just in need for food, but an increase in folks who are looking for delivery services in particular, because they are concerned about customs and immigration enforcement when they go to access services. So what I see is an opportunity for the city to get creative and look at opportunities to invest resources from our transportation resources. We'll have Seattle Transportation Benefit District, STM, excuse me, that'll need to get renewed. So I'd love to be able to use the City Council office to explore whether we can use those resources to help do more on food service delivery and connection, because I think that number is going to unfortunately continue to go up as we see, increasing fears from immigration and customs.
Thank you very much. So we're going to take a couple of questions from our audience. Can you stick around for that? Great. How can we continue to make housing more accessible for youth and young adults, specifically working with landlords to help them accept low-income families and applicants?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think we want to make sure that young people actually have access to know your rights information, and that there's access from the city side for enforcement if we have landlords who are not in compliance with accepting housing vouchers or other kinds of access programs that anybody might have. I purchased my own home with down payment assistance, and when I was doing so, made several offers that were rejected, and we at the time actually thought it was source of income discrimination. And I think that that's one thing we're looking at purchasing a home, but it's entirely something different when you are struggling to rent a place. So for me, I think it's about making sure that we have that clear through line in that instance of what is the know your rights information, and making sure that we are communicating that with landlords. We don't have in Seattle a landlord registry. We've had that in other places. It's come up from the city before. I think that's also something that we can revisit. The council looked at that, I think, in 2022 to make sure that there are ways to track information if we have folks who are not following or who are frequently out of compliance with what the city's laws are.
Thank you. We have one more question from the audience. I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. If you're in the audience and I read your question wrong, you can correct me. Okay. How will you encourage the siting of tent cities, shelters, care centers, and other human services, and overcome or change the small but vocal opposition to such? Did I get it right? Okay. Whoever wrote this, I hope I got it right.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I live down the street actually from a site that has been trying to come online for about 2 years. And it is a city-owned property where there have been, probably many of the folks in this room have been trying to get a tiny home village successfully set up. And to me, and I've talked to my neighbors, many of whom are like, we would love to have this happen. I've gone to the community meetings and listened to folks who are in other tiny home villages talk about their experiences. And I've listened to neighbors who live nearby say, this has been a great thing for our community. Is that we've gone out, we've chatted with folks, and we like to have coffee in the morning. Anyway, I can share more stories. But to me, I want to actually say that we need to look at the city's permitting process to make sure that it actually can run smoothly. So we talk about making sure that we're getting rid of red tape. We need to do that not just for housing, but also for our shelter system. So for me, that's the way to do it, is to look at the permitting process. The second thing that I think is interesting and important is to look at city-owned property. So that particular site that I mentioned, I believe, is city light property. And so I think the city has a responsibility with some of our public property where we have vacant lots to look at what are additional uses for those. So for me, starting with surveying there, looking there, and also making sure that we have a smooth permitting process. So we all know that people do better and people are more stable when they are housed. So it's about making sure that we are fighting to get those places stood up.
I have one more question.
Yep.
Many unpaid family caregivers, particularly African American women, balance full-time jobs while caring for older relatives. What specific policies or funding commitments would you support to expand caregiver stipend or programs for family caregivers? How would you champion family caregivers?
Thanks for this question. I'll start with just some previous experience. So I'm actually really proud that last year in 2024, I got to be a part of a group called Defend Washington. And as part of that effort, we helped stop the repeal on the ballot of some of the resources that go into Washington Cares. And that's important because some of those are available to kinship caregivers. So I'm really proud of that background. And when I think about kinship care, I think it's important not just for the folks who are providing care, but for the people who are receiving it, because people are going to be healthier, they're going to be happier when they're with their families, and that folks who are doing that care should actually receive the same access to resources when they're in the family that we would provide for out-of-home care. So, I would be excited to work with the Department of Human Resources to look at what resources are already going there, to make sure that we can protect those resources, to review them to see if they are adequate for what the needs are, and to make sure that we are making adjustments wherever possible.
Great, thank you so much. Are those all the questions we have for Ms. Musser? Great. Okay. Thank you so much. We invite you to stick around for the lightning round. It'll be a lot of fun. All right. Thank you so much. We have our two candidates here from Seattle City Council District 2. As a just reminder of the rules of the road, we do have a few questions for each of you that have been pre-prepared by Human Services workers and advocates. And then we are going to also have a couple of audience questions. Jamila is our timekeeper. Wait, Jamila. We have about 90 seconds for the first few questions, and then we'll have 60-second responses for the audience questions. All right, but let's start off by having you both introduce yourself. So why don't we start with you, Mr. Ducksworth?
All right. How long?
You have about a minute.
A minute, okay. So my name is Adonis Ducksworth. I'm running for City Council, District 2. I grew up in this district, right over here on 19th and Hanford. I live down in Rainier Beach with my wife and 2 kids. And a big reason why I'm running is because my oldest kid came up to me one day and said she wanted to move. Gun violence is a huge problem, and it's very scary, especially down in South Seattle. It's all throughout the district. And my experience working at the city, I worked at the DOT. I still work at the DOT, but I've been working at the DOT for almost the last 9 years. Been about 2 years in the mayor's office, and I'm back in the DOT, and I worked on policy, I worked on outreach, and I worked on engagement. And so seeing how things are done right and seeing how things are done wrong, and wanting to make a difference in my community and wanting to make it so that my kid actually wants to stay here in the district is a huge reason why I'm running. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. How about an introduction from you, Mr. Wood? 1 minute.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for everything you do for our community. I know there's a lot of folks that are in the human services here tonight. My name's Eddie. I work in the Seattle City Attorney's Office. For the past 6 years, I've been working on affordable housing. So projects like Centro, projects like the Ethiopian Community Village down on Rainier. And I'm married to a public school teacher, live on Beacon since 2007. I got 2 boys, one in Franklin and another one at UW. I'm the child of an immigrant from Taiwan, and it's a scary time right now. We need to do everything we can as a part of the earlier discussion to protect our community from these attacks against our immigrant communities, against our LGBTQIA, against folks seeking reproductive health care. And we need to make sure that we're taxing wealthy corporations instead of working families, instead of fixing some seniors to pay for our essential needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our first question, you're both going to have the same question. We're going to give you 90 seconds to respond, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Ducksworth, if that's okay. We have a significant shortage of high-quality, non-congregate shelter that meets the needs of people experiencing homelessness. As a result, existing shelters are regularly full, and thousands of Seattle residents must try and survive without shelter. What will you do to minimize harm for people who have no choice but to live outside?
Thank you for that question. First, I just want to say, as you know, growing up here on Beacon Hill, My dad, we moved to Beacon Hill so he could be close to the VA. He was an airborne ranger and he got out of the military and he slipped into substance abuse disorder. At some point he couldn't live in our house anymore, and it was really heartbreaking to see my dad on the street. And so one of the first things I always like to remind myself of is the folks that we see on the streets. Those are our fathers, our mothers, our brothers, our sisters. Those are the folks that we went to school with, that we grew up with. And so I always want to make sure that I'm talking about this with respect and dignity. And so for the folks that do have to sleep out on the street, we have to absolutely protect them in all the different ways that we can. We need to make sure that they have the medication that they need for those who are addicted, so that when they do want to stop, they can stay stopped, versus when they do want to stop, they get sick and then they go back to using drugs. And so making sure we have that medicine that works for them to help them get off drugs. The second thing too is we need to make sure that when there are assaults or there's anything that happens to them, whoever is responding to that treats them with respect and dignity and takes them seriously. So that those folks, because what happens is, and we see this happen in the Black community, where they don't take what we're saying seriously. They say, hey, I've been assaulted, this thing happened to me. And they don't take that seriously. And what we need to do is make sure that we take those things seriously so that they feel protected when they're on the street. And absolutely, we need more shelters. There was recently a Seattle Times article, there are shelter beds that are going unused right now, and that is just cruel and that's wrong.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure, that'd be great, thank you.
We have a significant shortage of high-quality, non-congregate shelter that meets the needs of people who experiencing homelessness. As a result, existing shelters are regularly full, and thousands of Seattle residents must try and survive without shelter. What will you do to minimize harm for people who have no choice but to live outside?
Yeah, so I would like to agree a lot with what Adonis is saying. I mean, first of all, we need to build a lot more shelter. It's unacceptable that we don't have enough housing, that we don't have enough shelter. And it will take time to build more. And so in the meantime, we should be doing everything we can to provide services to those who are living unsheltered. So, you know, that could be things like providing sanitation, because people living unsheltered, you know, we all produce waste, right? So there should be waste services. We should have public bathrooms. We should open up our community centers so people can use the bathrooms and take showers. There should be laundry facilities for folks that need it. We should expand housing vouchers because there are vacancies in some of our market rate buildings that we can tap into more quickly. You know, more broadly, we just need to not accept this idea that there aren't enough resources to meet our basic needs. You know, recently the Starbucks CEO is reported to get 6,666 times the amount of a Starbucks worker, right? So we've seen, you know, 30, 40 years ago where CEOs were getting 20 to 30 times the worker pay, but that has just skyrocketed. And so we see this growing economic inequality. And we have the resources here. But there's this myth that we can't afford to take care of our community, and we can, and it's unacceptable that we're not.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Lynn. The new federal budget law, H.R. 1, makes deep cuts to safety net programs like SNAP and Medicaid. In Seattle, more than half of food bank clients rely on SNAP, and food banks cannot make up the gap. For every one meal food banks provide, SNAP provides 9. At the same time, federal food support is shrinking and food prices are up 30% since 2020. What will you do to protect access to food for Seattle families in the face of these federal cuts?
Yeah, these federal cuts are devastating. Cuts to food assistance. It's unbelievable that that's what's happening. There was some recent reporting, I think, of King County putting some resources to keep food assistance going. We need to do similarly in the city, but I think we also need to work with the county and the state. This is not just going to be a city issue. So we need to pass progressive revenues. We need to increase the Jumpstart payroll tax. The wealthy just got one of the largest tax cuts in history, and we're seeing these cuts to Medicaid and Medicare and food assistance. But it would be even more impactful if we didn't just do so in Seattle, if we did so at a county-wide level, if we did so at the statewide level. We should work with our state legislators like Senator Frame and Representative Sean Scott to pass a wealth tax. And you know, we have some of the strongest champions of that here in Seattle, but we need to build support and build coalitions with some of our regional partners and do so across the state. But ultimately, you know, this is a choice that we are making as a nation to let kids go hungry, to let families go hungry, and we're doing so because the wealthy just want to extract more resources from our community, and we need to push back.
Thank you.
No, it's okay. Appreciate the question, and definitely agree with what Eddie is saying. And you know, there's just too much wealth in the city for people to go hungry and for people to go unhoused. And you know, I think back to a time that just sticks out for me, which was in December 1999, the protests against the WTO. And that was a pivotal moment for me because it was what I was starting to see is the globalization happening. I think people saw the writing on the wall then, that the rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer. And people stood up and they protested back then because they saw this coming in 2025. They saw this coming today. And so people to go without food, to go hungry, that creates instability. And what that does is that means kids can't concentrate in school. That means people can't concentrate on the job. So it's absolutely essential for people to have that food security. So I'm a big supporter of the B&O, the Seattle Shield, progressive revenue tax that will hopefully help to make sure that these types of programs stay funded. But I'm also a big supporter of, while we are, you know, making sure that the rich pay their fair share, I want to make sure that we're putting money back in the pockets of people who need it most. And so I'm a big supporter and would love to see a pilot of guaranteed basic income, because what kind of world could we be living in right now if people's basic needs were met? King County just recently did a pilot of a guaranteed basic income, and it showed that even as little as $500 a month makes a huge difference in people's lives, right? So then you're not worried about food, you're not worried about healthcare. People are spending this money on food and healthcare. And so I'd love to see something like that happen in the city of Seattle.
Thank you. For our last question that was pre-prepared by human services advocates and workers, I'd love to start with you. Last year, the council reinstated previously repealed loitering laws and banishment zones for public drug use and prostitution. Do you support this legislation? If not, please share the negative consequences of this legislation, who it impacts, and what other policies you would support instead.
Sure. So the answer is no. I do not support this. Cameras are not going to stop people from doing what they're doing. What we need to do is make sure people's basic needs are met. If we want people to stop stealing, if we want people to stop doing drugs, if we want people to stop turning to crime, we need to make sure their basic needs are met. And their basic needs are met from the moment that they're born. So that's my position on that. And I'll tell a quick story here. So my house was broken into down in Rainier Beach. I think it was November, December of 2019. My house was broken into 4 months later. And at the second time it was broken into, we had cameras, and the person breaking into the house, and if anybody's had their home broken into, it's traumatizing, it's hard, it's really, you know, I have 2 kids and a wife, and man, it's really hard to like go through that. Anyways, we had cameras, and the guy looked up into the camera and still kicked the door in. The cameras didn't make a difference in that situation. I don't think they're going to make a difference now. And one of the negative consequences, or I call it a negative externality, but well, anyways, I'll try not to be all wonky about it. But so if somebody gets banished from an area and they decide to get sober, and they get sober, and they're sober for 2 years, and they come back and they jaywalk, the way the law is currently written, they could go to jail for jaywalking 2 years sober. And that's just backwards and wrong.
Thank you. Last year, the council reinstated previously repealed loitering laws and banishment zones for public drug use and prostitution. Do you support this legislation? If not, please share the negative consequences of this legislation, who it impacts, and what other policies you would support instead.
Yeah, no, I do not support, and I think, you know, we've seen these laws in effect for about a year, and they have not produced any measurable positive impact. I think that they are a misunderstanding of why, I mean, I think open-air drug use and prostitution are a concern, and yet banishing people is not going to solve that problem. Jailing people without providing resources is not going to solve that problem. And, you know, I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of why, you know, where people are at. People are often experiencing trauma, experiencing, you know, mental health issues, and to traumatize them further by, you know, banishing them, putting them through a legal system that does not give them any resources is only going to make our problems harder to solve. So, you know, as we help people with mental health, with behavioral health, at the same time, we're making the problem larger with our criminal legal system. Because, you know, when somebody is jailed, they are, you know, likely going to lose their connections. They're going to lose their job. They might lose their housing. And then they're going to be even worse off because we haven't provided any resources. We haven't provided any rehab. And so until we address our criminal legal system, we're not going to solve anything by banishing or arresting people. We're just recycling and making things harder on ourselves.
Thank you. So we're going to go to a couple of questions from the audience. It's okay. And then you're going to have about a minute to answer those. So we'll start with you, Mr. Lynn. We know that some survivors of domestic and sexual violence seek protections from the criminal legal system. We also know that this system causes great harm to so many individuals and communities, and sometimes survivors themselves. How do you balance these two realities and advocate for criminal policies and prosecuting individual cases? I will try again. We know that some survivors of domestic and sexual violence seek protections from the criminal legal system. We also know that this system causes great harms to so many individuals and communities, and sometimes survivors themselves. How do you balance these two realities and advocate for criminal policies and prosecuting individual cases?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. It's a tricky question, or a tricky issue. And I think, you know, when we think about the root causes of domestic violence, you know, oftentimes it is, you know, hurt people oftentimes hurt people. People who are in very stressful situations when they can't pay their bills, you know, they're stressed out, and that plays out in different ways. So, you know, we have intergenerational trauma in our communities. And so, you know, the criminal legal system is not going to help that. We need to make sure that people who are experiencing domestic violence can get help, and so that they can get housing if they need those resources, and they can get other support so that they can leave that situation. I think we need to lean into restorative justice programs when possible. But unfortunately, yes, there does need to be prosecution at times when people are harming others. But if we're just prosecuting, and again, we're not providing rehab or restorative justice, we're not really helping our community in the long run.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this question, and it hits pretty close to home. Like I mentioned, my dad suffered from substance abuse disorder, and so as a kid, I saw lots of violence in my house, and as a kid, you're very confused about why these things are happening, why this person keeps coming back in your house, why they keep attacking, you know, the person that you love, and, you know, why can't they just go away as a kid? This is what you're thinking as a kid. And so, you know, one of the things that we need to make sure that we have is support for the victims of domestic violence and the children of of the victims of domestic violence, to make sure that they, can heal. Because as Eddie said, this is intergenerational, and as I got to know my dad more and his family more, these are the things that happened to him as a child, and these happened in the 60s and 70s. And that's the only way that they knew it. But I think we've advanced far enough in our society where we can start providing support of the survivors of domestic violence. And then on the flip side, for somebody who can't be around someone else, we need to work with the city's attorney's office. We need to work with the King County Prosecutor's Office to make sure that those protection orders are held.
Thank you so much. We have one more question from the audience. Can you stick around for that?
Hopefully it's like a light question.
I think you know the forum where you are, and so
That's fair.
it's not on your side. It is disgraceful that Washington State has the most regressive tax structure in the country. I strongly support a tax system of tax the rich. Tax the rich. Do you agree? What are the specifics of your plan? Thank you. And it's signed. Michael. Yes.
Okay.
Let's start with
Yes, I do agree. And like I said before, Seattle, I don't know, I grew up in Seattle, and I'll just put it like this. Me and my mom, we lived in a little triplex. I had a friend who lived in a single family home, another friend who lived in an apartment. And really, Seattle was a place that like all people, all types of people, all races, all income levels could be. And everyone had a home. And things started to change. And now Seattle really is a city of the haves and the have-nots. And there's too much wealth in the city for anyone to be going hungry or not have a roof over their head. And so one of the first things that I would love to advocate for is an income tax. Like, let's start there, use my soft powers on city council to advocate at the highest level for an income tax. Jumpstart is another place, and we need to protect Jumpstart for the things that we said we were going to do with that money. That's how you lose faith, that's how you lose confidence in your local government, when they start changing the rules on you midstream.
Thank you. Mr. Wright?
Yes, let's tax the wealthy. Let's create a fair tax code. Right now, the lowest income pay like 13.5% of already very low income in sales and property taxes, while the wealthiest pay about 3.5%. We have the 49th most regressive tax system, and meaning the worst tax system in the country. Florida's number 50. And I think we have to back up a little bit. Again, earlier talked about the extreme pay for our CEOs. For centuries, the wealthiest have extracted wealth, by stealing land, by stealing labor, and that extractive economy continues. And so, when we talk about public safety, when we talk about violence, we don't talk about the violence of our economic system that exploits people, that exploits labor. That results with people living on the street and the harms and violence of that. So, we talk about intergenerational harm and intergenerational lost wealth. We owe the Black community billions from the lost wealth and stolen labor. And so until we repair, until we extract wealthy, until we tax the rich, we're never going to solve our most basic problems.
Thank you. For sticking with us. We are going to ask you a bunch of yes and no questions. You also have a waffle if you're going in between. So thank you for standing here with us. Our first question. Have you ever tried to parallel park on Capitol Hill and nailed it on the first try? We got some good parkers. Have you or your family ever relied on human services to meet your basic needs? Will you support making child care workers categorically eligible to receive child care subsidies regardless of income? Do you support providing housing for people without requiring them to be clean and sober? Do you think there is enough accessible shelter to meet the needs of our community each night?
Yes.
For youth, for seniors, for veterans, for families? Will you champion additional city funding for interpretive services for Seattle residents with hearing and sight disabilities to use during your communications, such as job interviews, talking with children's teachers, landlords, and human services providers? Will you meet with nonprofits, community-based organizations, and coalitions at least on a quarterly basis to maintain ongoing dialogue and accountability? Will you commit to pursuing progressive revenue to fully fund human services? Will you commit to partnering with Seattle Human Services Coalition and other human service funders to secure the additional revenue necessary to close the 37% wage gap that human services workers face? All right. Thank you all so much for participating in the lightning round. Again, I do want to just remind us of some of our logistics. We are going to hear from both of our candidates for Seattle Mayor. We will have a 1-minute intro from each candidate. We will have a few questions that were pre-prepared ahead of time by human services providers and advocates, and we will give each person 90 seconds to respond. And then we will have a couple that are from the audience. Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson and Mayor Harrell, for being here with us today. We're excited to hear from you. I would love to start with an introductory statement from each of you. We'll start with you, Mayor Harrell, and you have 60 seconds.
Jess, I didn't think this was on. Okay. Well, good evening, and thank all of you for being here. I know it's been a long evening. So I think you know my name is Bruce Harrell, and I think you may have known. I was born of modest means, from a mother who was interned in a concentration camp and a father who came here to Seattle for a better life from the segregated South. Went to Seattle Public Schools here and attended University of Washington on a football scholarship and then to law school. And I've tried to serve you faithfully, with kindness, with hard work, making no excuses. And I realize how tough it is here. And under our administration, we have invested over $1 billion in housing, affordable housing, and homelessness strategies. We've tried to rebuild a public safety system with good police officers from your community, but an unarmed response as well. We try to be a leader in education, making sure every child can go to college or pursue their dreams in Seattle. This is a big job, and with Trump in office, it's become even bigger. And I will look forward to our debate, because my time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ms. Wilson?
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm not going to give my normal intro speech because I've given it like 3 times today already, but I'll just say that it is wonderful to be here in this space, Centro de Raza, with such a rich history of community organizing. And it's a pleasure to be here with the Seattle Human Services Coalition, and I have been privileged to work over the years with the Seattle Human Services Coalition on so many efforts, whether that's fighting for wage equity for human services workers, or whether that's fighting for better transit access for people experiencing homelessness, or fighting for progressive revenue to fund the vital human services that are helping to get people off the streets. So it's wonderful to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. So our first few questions, as I mentioned in the intro, have been prepared by human services workers and advocates, and we're going to give you each 90 seconds to respond. We'd like to start with you, Mayor Harrell, for the first question.
Yeah.
Seattle residents rely on nonprofit organizations to provide essential services like food, shelter, health care, and more. But chronically low wages, high staff turnover, and vacancies compromise organizations' ability to meet the needs of their clients. A 2023 UW study found that Seattle Human Services workers are paid at least 37% less than their peers in other industries, and recommended a 7% wage increase by 2025 to begin to address that gap. So far, the mayor and city council have added a 2% wage increase in 2024 and are considering another 2% in 2026. If elected, how will you help to build a more robust and stable human services workforce so that you can meet the needs of the community?
Yes, and I want to recognize first the basis of the question, that these valuable workers, invaluable workers, are underpaid. And as you may recall, when I was on the city council, I supported making sure that every year, no matter what in our contracts, that these workers would get a COLA. And looking at the wage equity issue, I'll just give you the numbers. In 2024, of course, we supported a 2% wage increase in addition to the COLA. In my proposed budget, we have a 2% increase, $11.7 million, to address the issue of the COLA in addition to the wage equity increase. That's $11.7 million. But I have to also remind you, we've had a very tough budget. We were facing a $240 million deficit. But year after year, we try to invest or increase that, lower that gap in wage equity. So what we'll do is we'll reach that 7% wage number, and we'll revisit it and set it again. I want to thank all of the workers. I've met with the Human Services Coalition for 16 years, always making sure my door is open, and my wife worked in this field as well. So we are committed, we will remain committed. We cannot do this work without you. And the fact is there are inequity issues in this kind of work, and that's exactly why we'll continue to address it through wage increases and the wage equity increase.
Thank you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. Seattle residents rely on nonprofit organizations to provide essential services like food, shelter, healthcare, and more. But chronically low wages, high staff turnover, and vacancies compromise organizations' ability to meet the needs of their clients. A 2023 UW study found that Seattle Human Services workers are paid at least 37% less than their peers in other industries, and recommended a 7% wage increase by 2025 to begin to address that gap. So far, the mayor and city council have added a 2% wage increase in 2024 and are considering another 2% increase in 2026. If elected, how will you help build a more robust and stable human services workforce that can meet the needs of the community?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question, and in all of the community organizing, coalition building work that I've done over the years, often in partnership with the Seattle Human Services Coalition and other groups of service providers, I've talked to so many human services workers, and really it's so dramatic the difference that it makes, right? When you can't afford to live in the city where you're working because you're not being paid enough, you're not doing your best work. And with high turnover, when you're trying to help people out of homelessness, that consistency of a case manager or someone that you're working with is so vitally important. So we need to get this right. So one thing is to make sure that we are fighting for new progressive revenue so that we can fund higher wages in our city contracts, and I'm absolutely committed to doing that. I've been fighting for progressive revenue my whole career, and I will continue to do that at the local level and also at the state level. And also tackling our housing crisis is part of this too, right? Because the more we can get our housing costs in Seattle under control, the more affordable it will be for the folks who work here doing that vital work to also be able to live here.
Thank you. We'd like to start with you for the next question, Ms. Wilson. Many gender-based violence programs are being forced to choose between upholding core values of serving all survivors regardless of gender identity or immigration status, and losing critical federal funding because of recent executive orders. If elected, what steps would you take to ensure gender-based violence programs are able to continue offering life-saving services to everyone in our city?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pattern that's being repeated in so many areas right now, right? And the foundation of the answer is that we have to stand up for our values, right? We cannot bend. And so while doing that, we have to realize that there may be consequences, and we have to be willing. I feel like a lot of these questions are going to come back to seeking new progressive revenue, right? Because we need to be able to backfill if there are cuts from the federal level, because we are standing by our values and we're making sure that our programs serve everyone. And so am absolutely committed to doing that, both, again, at the local level and partnering with state legislators at the state level, and making sure that if federal funding is being cut, that we are stepping up and making sure that those programs can continue.
Thank you. And Harrell, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes.
Okay. Many gender-based violence programs are being forced to choose between upholding core values of serving all survivors regardless of gender identity or immigration status, and losing critical federal funding because of recent executive orders. If elected, what steps would you take to ensure gender-based violence programs are able to continue offering life-saving services to everyone in our city?
Okay, thank you. And first I want to thank many of you. We have CVOs all over this city and county providing services to over 10,000 survivors. I want to thank you for that. In our budget, we recognize this travesty, and we have invested over $18 million spread out to 35 organizations. Specifically, if you look at the work that we're doing in human trafficking, that I looked at our budget, and we started in 2022, the budget I inherited was around $4 million. By 2025, we upped that to nearly $8 million. So in our administration, we spent close to $24 million in this space. It's still not enough if we're trying to save lives. If you look at our Mayor's Office of Ending Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, MODVCA, we've increased that by $2 million to enhance services for survivors of sexual exploitation. You may recall that when the Roe versus Wade decision came out and this maniac we have in office had come out called Donald Trump, that I looked at our welcoming city status and I said, let's amend that to protect women seeking reproductive health care. Perhaps they have a warrant in another state that they're coming here for reproductive health care issues. And we ordered our police department not to enforce any warrants. So we've tried to lead the way in this country in this space of how women are having the pressures that they have on them and victims as well, and survivors.
Would you be able to speak to some of the ways that our providers are having to essentially choose between serving all survivors regardless of identity or status and losing funding as a result?
Well, what I've tried to make it very clear is no person should have to sacrifice anything relative to their values and their beliefs and who they are. And I think every policy that I've either authored or proposed in the last 16 years has, as an elected leader, been supportive of that. These are almost inhumane decisions that people are having to face. And so I come to you as community-based leaders to help us draft policies, help make sure that my executive orders are consistent with this, but we fully recognize the challenges that are presented in front of us.
Thank you. Same question for you, Ms. Wilson. Would you like me to reread it?
Yeah.
Many gender-based violence programs are being forced to choose between upholding core values of... Oh, I'm sorry. I started you through first. Okay. We're going to move on to question 3.
You don't have to admit, I was just giving the wrong answer or something.
Well, I also want to just make sure that you didn't have any additional, because we did give some.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just say that, I think that the city has a very important convening role to play, right? I think we're all kind of finding our way in these times, and so I think that, we need to be working together with the county, and I think convening providers and really working together to figure out what are those steps that are going to protect people in these times.
Thank you. So our next question is about seniors, and we're going to start with you, Mayor Harrell. Older adults in Seattle face numerous challenges, from lack of access to health care, nutritious foods, and transportation, to social isolation and lack of community support. Alarmingly, older adults are the fastest growing unhoused population in Seattle. Today, 12% of seniors in Washington are experiencing homelessness, and if trends continue, 1 in 5 will be unhoused by 2035. Unlike chronic homelessness, many seniors lose housing because of rent increases, medical debt, or the loss of a spouse, factors that make them especially vulnerable in our city's housing crisis. What specific policies or investments will you champion to ensure that older adults in Seattle, especially those who are low income, BIPOC, or living with disabilities, can age with dignity, access affordable housing and health care, and remain connected to their communities?
So we have to recognize, once again, we are a fast-growing city, one of the fastest in the country, about fourth. And this issue is near and dear to me because I'm not 21, I'll just put it that way. So what are we going to do about it? First thing we did is look at our budget, and we put in $98 million to support the aging and disability services. You heard me recently announce an $80 million anti-gentrification and reparations package, because families like mine were a direct victim of racist redlining policies here in Seattle. And I'm having an open, transparent conversation about that. We invested $40 million in food programming, $2.8 million in community meals. We served over 370,000 meals for older adults. We are a national leader in food policy, and we are recognized for that. That is not Harrell administration work. That is the city of Seattle leading the way with many of you in this room. We just recently authored $6 million approved of Fresh Bucks. We had 4,000 people on the waiting list. We're serving 12,000 on Fresh Bucks. We took up what they were receiving by 50%, which would be about approximately $60 a month. Under my budget, we're taking them all off of the waiting list. We'll feed 16,000 people. We put $4 million in local food banks for home delivery for those that can't make it there. We are Seattle leading the way, and it's because of a lot of the work you're doing in this room.
This was a really robust question, and I want to also make sure that we have an opportunity for you to address access to housing and health care and connection to communities. And I'll be sure to give additional time.
So in housing, you know how unaffordable housing is right now. So you all helped me pass the largest housing levy in history at $970 million. Under our current budget at $350 million, this is unprecedented for our city of Seattle. Under my first term, we invested over $1 billion. And if you look at my proposed comp plan, I am building for 330,000 units, which is twice the number of our old comp plan. The fact of the matter is we're also doing many things to speed up the process. If you look at the Cortera project in the University Village, we cut down the red tape by 2 years. You look at the Fort Lawton, where we're going to have 500 units as one other example, where we're able to speed up the process in getting good, affordable homes here to Seattle. Under my administration, we have built 50,000 housing units. That is a record by any stretch of imagination. And you must recall that I inherited a tough hand coming out of COVID. When I first got elected, everyone in here would be wearing a mask just about. But despite that, we've built 50,000 units, and in our housing levy, we will keep 9,000 people in their house to prevent them from being homeless and build another 3,100. So we've tried to be a housing leader. The first thing I did systematically was I created a sub-housing cabinet in my administration. It had never been done before. Every department that touches housing, we come together to figure out how we can increase our production. And that's leadership, and that's taking a chance to do something creative, because we realize as Seattle grows, it's become unaffordable.
Thank you. And if you'd like, I can reread the question.
I think I've got it. So it's
Okay.
about protecting especially seniors who are at risk of falling into homelessness,
Correct.
and losing their health care.
And let's make sure we get 3 minutes this time.
Okay. I probably won't take 3 minutes, but so yeah, a number of different things here. So I think that the city can do better at protecting low-income renters, including seniors who are at risk of falling into homelessness. A few things the city can do. We have a law called Economic Displacement Relocation Assistance, where if your landlord raises your rent 10% or more and you have to move out, if you're under 80% of area median income, your landlord is supposed to provide 3 times your monthly rent in relocation assistance. I believe we should bump that threshold down from 10% to 5%. So that will mean that there's a disincentive for landlords to raise the rent more than 5%, And if they do and you move out, then that gives that mitigating money that can help you to find a new place. That's one thing. Also, we have predatory rental junk fees. If you're a renter, you might have experienced this, where there's kind of the sticker price of your apartment, of your lease, and then once you get into the details, there's all kind of fees that you didn't even really see at the beginning. So the city can regulate or ban some of those fees. Up in Bellingham, they've started to do that, so we can do that and we can go further. So those are a couple of things that we can do to better protect low-income renters. Second of all, protecting lower-income homeowners, right? So often seniors maybe bought their house many years ago, have a very low income, and then are falling behind, struggling to keep up with property taxes, the cost of maintaining that property. So what can the city do? So we can help people to build ADUs or DADUs on their property so that they can have that extra income stream, or that also can enable multi-generational living. There might also be ways that we can facilitate like low-interest loans for improvements on a property. So I think there's things that we can do to help people to stay in their homes. Thirdly, social housing, right? This is actually one of the reasons I jumped into this race, because I really believe that we need leadership from the mayor's office that's going to make our new social housing developers successful. And if we're doing social housing right, then that can also be affordable senior housing, where people are not having to pay more than 30% of their income in rent every month. Next, I'll say, moving away from housing toward, you mentioned just kind of like community. We have great senior centers and community centers around the city, and so I think having the city be a really strong partner with those institutions, so that we are helping to make sure that there is that programming, there's meals, there's things that can get people out of their homes, right? I think it can often be very isolating to be a senior in a big city if you don't have a strong community and family around you. And then finally, on the healthcare front, this is going to be just a huge challenge coming up, especially as some people are at risk of losing Medicaid coverage. And I know this is going to be a big topic in the state legislature, so I think the city needs to be partnering really strongly with state legislators and trying to make sure that people aren't falling through the cracks. We have community clinics in Seattle that serve folks who don't have insurance, and I believe that the city does provide some funding for those, so we should look at what we can do to better support them.
Thank you. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for one more question before we move to audience? Great. I got the thumbs up. We'll start with you, Ms. Wilson. Even though unsheltered homelessness is on the rise, the federal grants pass decision has cleared the way for communities to respond to homelessness with jail and fines instead of housing, shelter, and real help. Jurisdictions have also historically used major sporting events to forcibly displace people experiencing homelessness without anywhere else to go. The 2026 World Cup provides an opportunity for Seattle to lead on effective solutions to homelessness. As mayor, what approaches would you support to help people secure shelter and housing that meets their needs leading up to the World Cup and beyond?
Yeah, this is such an important question, and I think one of the things that I've been most disappointed in over the last 4 years has been seeing the current administration's approach to the homelessness crisis, and the fact that we are just pushing people around the city without meaningful offers of shelter and support. And I think that came out very clearly in a recent Seattle Times article, that we are not providing meaningful offers of shelter and support. I think we have 2 homeless people in Seattle for every 1 shelter bed, and we have lost shelter capacity every single year for the last 4 years. So it is very apparent that we need to urgently open new emergency housing and shelter so that we can get people inside. And we know what works, right? We have the Just Care model that was stood up during the pandemic, that model was continued in the encampment resolution program at the state level. Basically, if you approach people living in an encampment with a relationship building attitude and meaningful offers of shelter and support that actually meets their needs, vast majority of people will accept that help. And so that is the approach that we need to be taking. We cannot have another 4 years where we have more people sleeping unsheltered on the streets every single year, and where we are pushing people around and destabilizing them and harming people. And we've had more people die outside or by violence in the last 4 years than in any previous term in this city.
Mr. Harrell, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I got the gist of it. With respect to the FIFA games, and whether it's the FIFA games or the All-Star games we have, yes, this gives us a chance, an opportunity to show the world what kind of city we are. We never base removals based on that factor. We try to house people, but the fact of the matter is this is really tough work. Because at the same time we have reduced encampments by 80% in the city, we recognize we are living in a country where homelessness has gone up 18%. It's gone up in the state, this country, this county. This is tough work. The answer has been to put people in permanent supportive housing. As you look at 2023, you look at over 2,200 people, 2,204 people had accepted shelter, around the same number the year after. What we continue to push is a regional approach because, again, 85% of the tiny homes in the entire county are here in Seattle. 63% of the shelter in the entire county are here in Seattle, in 84 square miles, when we were trying to make sure everyone could live here. And so my push for a regional approach is real. When 70% of the people we're treating here in Seattle did not become unhoused in Seattle. To me, it is offensive, completely offensive to any of you to think that I would lead the city in a way that's not fully compassionate. My wife and I have been working on housing and health and human services issues for over 30 years. We donate our personal money, our personal time, our personal resources, and our skills to shelter people, and we'll continue to do that work despite the challenges we have.
Questions from the audience? You can stick around for those.
Yes.
So our first question from the audience, and we'll ask you, Ms. Wilson, to answer first. What are issues, systemic or otherwise, you feel are at the core of youth and young adult homelessness? How do you plan to address this specific population's needs? How do these solutions account for young families? And this is from Mockingbird Youth.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I mean, I think first of all, at the core of this is our affordability crisis, our housing crisis. And for families, that also includes a crisis of the cost of care, of child care in our city. And you know, the fact is, if you're a working parent, if you're a low-wage worker, the cost of child care is simply prohibitive, and the cost of housing is prohibitive. And that's one reason why the median income for a married couple with children in our city is now over $250,000. And they stop even finding the exact number at that point. And what that tells you is that working families cannot afford to live here, and they are moving out of the city. And those without the resources to move somewhere stable are becoming homeless. And you know, the stresses that not having enough material resources puts on a family, also contributes to young people falling into homelessness as well.
Thank you. Sure. What are issues, systemic or otherwise, you feel are at the core of youth and young adult homelessness? How do you plan to address this specific population's needs? How do these solutions account for young families?
So youth homelessness is caused by a variety of factors. Many are systemic. Racism, which has affected many families. Many of their safeguards around them are gone. They don't have love in their life. They don't have a community in their life. And many of them come from families that just don't give them the support once again. If you look at why we got into the pre-K business as a city, we were not in that. We looked at brain development between 0 and 4 to make sure that kids, by the time they are in the 3rd grade, are reading proficient. We also look at what happens when they get out of high school. They have no roads. These kids, they graduate with a 2.6, 2.7 GPA, they find themselves in a wayward situation. And that is exactly why any kid in the Seattle Public Schools under our leadership can go to college for 2 years for free. So what we don't have is the safeguards around them, and that's why we're so passionate. I mean, I was that kid coming out of Seattle Public Schools. I know how rough it could be. Right now, these kids are traumatized. There are probably people right here that are working around with some untreated trauma. So time is up. But that's a good question. I think that's what sure changing both of us all the time.
Well, thank you from the Mockingbird Youth for asking the question. Our final question, and we'll start with you, Mayor Harrell, first, is about leadership, messaging, and NIMBYism. Seattle often sees big projects or proposals blocked or softened because of community resistance. For example, the debate around a clothing optional beach at Denny Blaine or the Nicholsville Brighton Village site. How would you lead through these moments when backlash arises? And how would you communicate and defend the social value of projects and gatherings that serve inclusion, diversity, and dignity rather than retreating when controversy hits?
Wow, a lot in that question. That is the definition of leadership. When you're in this position with so many contentious issues, trying to find the right answer, you have to pull on life experiences. I know what it's like to be othered. You have no idea how rough it was for me growing up. So when I look at a different issue, and I'll take the Denny Blaine as a situation, people wanted a park where their grandkids could be there. People in the LGBTQ plus wanted a place where they'd express themselves as we would welcome them to do. How do you reconcile that? So you're honest and you're transparent. And if you make a mistake, you say, I'm sorry. Perhaps I took a left turn and I should have taken a right turn. Under my leadership, we take chances. I understand there are things that I propose that people say, I propose body cameras, and everybody thought I was out of my mind. I proposed ban the box where you can't ask someone about their criminal background on a job that they thought was out of my mind. But you have a North Star, and that's how you lead and you take chances, and that's what Seattle deserves.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is so important, and I would say that the answer is vision, engagement, and leadership. So vision means that we need to start with an overall vision of where we are going with our city, right? And that needs to be built collaboratively, but it needs to actually be a vision of the direction that we are going in. And our specific decisions need to be made and articulated and explained in the context of that bigger vision, because that helps people to understand. For example, if we're saying, we need new tiny houses in a number of different neighborhoods. Then when there's a tiny house village planned in their neighborhood, then they understand this is part of this bigger vision. This is not just like, we're not being singled out, right? The second part is engagement. So we actually need to do that work of making sure that we're going out to the community, making sure that people are brought along, they know what's going on. And then third, leadership, because not everyone's gonna like it. And that's the part where you just need to move forward and you need to do it, if it's the right thing to do. And this is one of the disappointments that I've had with the current administration, because I think we've seen with the Brighton Tiny House Village, with 10 City 4, right? We've seen instances where commitments have been pulled back because of complaints from a few neighbors.
I just want to thank you both for being here. I'd like to thank all of the candidates who were here earlier. We know that these were tough and challenging questions. And just really appreciate the engagement with all of the human services providers and supporters from across the city. So thank you. Harrell.
Thank you.
With that, for closing remarks, I'd like to turn it over to Jen Muzia, who is the Seattle Human Services Coalition co-chair, and Marissa, Perez, the Seattle Human Services Coalition Executive Director.
All right. First off, thank you all for being here tonight. It's amazing to have this community come together. It really makes a difference when we all care, when we all are fighting for human services and making sure everyone in our community can thrive. So thank you for being here. I just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, because we couldn't do it without y'all. So, Rainier Valley Food Bank, University District Food Bank, Pike Market Senior Center and Food Bank, Fallon Food Bank, Centro de la Raza, thank you for this, a Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence, Chinese Information and Service Center, Crisis Connections, Seattle Women's Commission, OPEIU Local 8, Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness. We also had a child care tonight from Wright-Soika. Thank you for Kelsey and Dee Finley for taking care of our kids. Fair Start provided food. Oh, you do an amazing job keeping time. I watched, I sat right by her all night. She was fantastic.
Thanks, Jen. And I also want to thank you all for putting up with having flexibility this evening as we waited for candidates to come and had other candidates you know, we just had so much interest, and there were so many questions, and there was just, it was a wonderful night and such an engaging night, and it's thanks to all of you for coming and being a part of this evening. I do want to ask my candidate forum committee to please stand. Vidrana, Nathaniel, Zoe, Joe, Holly, Bee, Rachel, Jerry, and Whitney. Without them, this event would not have happened. They've been working on this event for 10 months. Every month they've been working on this. And so this event has been the most well-resourced, most community-grounded candidate forum that I think we've ever had, as long as I've been in the role, which has only been a year, so, you know. But it's just been a wonderful evening, and it's really thanks to them. I also want to thank our interpreters, David Smith and Ann Delizio. Volunteers, including our youth volunteers from the Mockingbird Society, Gloria, Jordan, Nathan, Kevin, Megan, and Danielle. And again, thank you to the candidates. Most of them have gone on to other engagements or just simply to put their feet up after a long day. But those of you that are still here, thank you so much for coming. This truly means the world.